how do you link a physical object to an NFT? That's what I don't get.
NFT is just information, right? There are two components to the NFT. One is the JSON file, right? That's your primary link.
Yeah.
And the other is your, usually the image or the asset file, right? So what you can do with any NFT is that, first of all, the asset file could be anything, but probably an image because that'll make it show up nicely in your MetaMask wallet. And then you can have the information about the thing in the, in either of those two locations.
I think
the thing is, it's not going to protect you if the thing gets stolen, right? I mean, who owns who
yeah, but
has possession of the Rolex?
It introduces more friction. Like, it's almost like in 2022, it's not practical to steal a car. Despite the value of a car, people don't typically do it because of the VIN system, right? So it's like if Rolex issued an NFT from the Rolex official account every time they created a new wallet, and they're the sole creator of Rolex watches, you then can determine the legitimacy of the watch. So I do think it creates
the owner, because then after that thing's separated. That's true for any set of papers you do, right? So if you make a wallet or a car or whatever, right, and you ship it with papers that go along with whatever that is.
Yeah.
If there is a social understanding, those papers go with it, which is very much the case, like antiques and provenance papers and all that kind of thing. Like,
but the papers can be forged. The NFT from the official Rolex account cannot.
That's an interesting point. Mostly true. It does require people care about the NFT, right? If you're wearing a stolen Rolex, you're not walking around with those papers.
I know, but the thing is, if I were to go to a pawn shop and purchase a Rolex and they did not have the NFT counterpart, I know what I'm getting into.
You probably know what you're getting into when you buy a Rolex from a pawn shop anyway, don't you?
I'm trying to argue the case. Then what is the value of this concept? I don't get it.
Marketing. I mean, there are a couple things you could do with an NFT. An NFT can be the representation of a rights agreement of some kind, right? For example, I was actually just talking. It was actually on Lunch Club. I was talking with a guy who's issuing bonds, basically. So basically, that you can buy their stable coin, which they allege is stable coin, whatever, and you can exchange that stable coin for a bond. Right? So you can buy like $1,000 of X stable coin. They call it beans. And then you can turn those beans into a bond that will pay off under certain conditions, right? Which now becomes an NFT, right? And the NFT, it contains ownership rights that will go along with it. But I appreciate like that. That's a financial example. So what would be I've talked with another guy who actually is pitching over at Andreessen Horowitz, to have NFTs that contain intellectual property rights. So that's an off-chain thing, right? So the rights to use a certain song or whatever, and having that be embedded in or reflected in a blockchain agreement, right? So that would be an example of, something where like the thing that you bought is actually represented in the NFT, because both those represent, some form of rights or digital media. And then you can have something off-chain, right? So which is gets what you're talking about, like some sort of documentation or an NFT thing that goes along with the physical thing that you sold. And what I'm seeing main use for that so far is not a protect you from the law problem, or even particularly a rights issue. It's a nice bit of marketing thing that says, oh, hey, thanks for buying our t-shirt. Here's the NFT so you can have in your wallet the same kind of cool branding you got with your t-shirt, right? So you buy our $50 t-shirt, and now you also get this NFT that you can mint off of whatever site.
Okay. I think there's more to the story, though, because there are people advocating this sort of like ownership, like traceability and ownership on physical goods. I don't know how that's going to work, but
sure. But then, of course, you would need to make it, and this is where like the rights example comes into play. You need to make it that ownership goes with the digital asset, right? So basically saying that the exchange of this NFT exchanges who has the right to that particular, Rolex watch in your example, right? As opposed to if you just take your Rolex watch, you bring it to the pawn shop doesn't have a legal right to it because they don't have the NFT. Except, of course, they've got the Rolex watch and possession is 99%. So it becomes a tricky thing, because things like VIN numbers and the question of like who really owns what, there's a lot of law that goes into that, because the question of ownership of, say, a vehicle is determined by regulations. Right? right? So it's not that some clever auto person said, well, you can only own a car if you register the VIN number with the government. It's, there are these laws that go along with it. And so what becomes the enforcement mechanism becomes the key question.